Hey, Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I have this is a missile that is seen on the screen here. It says in memory of victims of Epstein Island. So, it's and I went to the post. You'll find the post on X, and I went through the comments, and it was actually confirmed that somebody actually confirmed, and it says this is actually true. So it actually says in memory of the sacrificed victims on Epstein Island, right? So, pretty much, there's still a constant airing out of the atrocities, the filthy behaviors of what happens to, or what I should say, the filthy behaviors that a lot of our politicians and presidents and leaders of these so-called great nations are actually involved in. There was a show I used to watch on Netflix, years ago called House of Cards. It was on Netflix, and it kind of showed you the insides of a lot of the things that the politicians, presidents, the things that they would actually get involved in, right? So they deliberately show you these things in movies, but people are they're so disconnected to the fact that, or under gross darkness, that they don't see the correlation, right? So I thought I'll just read a little bit of this article here, but essentially, not only are you seeing a shameful spewing, you're starting to see that like Apostle Paul said, that man of sin being revealed, and it's not just by the prophets. You're starting to see it by more, like multiple, like at different angles now. So now you're seeing it by their own people, where their own people are actually questioning the validity of those people in the land, right? Through people like such as Tucker Carlson. If you search up him and his interview, his inquisition, trying to figure out their bloodline, their history, and so on and so forth. There's essentially they're being scoped out, they're being watched essentially, right? Because people are realizing this is a bunch of you know nothing is adding up, right? But really, the point, to go, not to lose myself, there is essentially, you start to see there's more people calling out a lot of these different sinful behaviors of what these people are actually involved in, right? And this is something I just want to grab real quick. Yahweh Shai said, this is Luke chapter 8 verse 17 here, and it says, for nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be made, shall not be known and come abroad, right? So there's multiple, the calling out is becoming, the scale of the calling out, I should say, is growing. Now it's just not just by the prophets, and starting with our apostles and elders who spoke about these things years ago, but it's been, now it's multiple, different people are actually, pointing the finger. And there's something in the law which I find very interesting, where it says, when there is two witnesses or three, that person should be put to death, right? So you have like examples of third witnesses or a fourth witness now, right? Multiple different people are actually calling out the different atrocities of what's going on here, right? So I wanted to just read this, and let me read a little bit of the article, then I'll go to the book of Nahum, right? And it says, the missile marked in memory of Epstein Island victims fired by Iran amid war. So it says here, 12 days into the U.S. and Israel's war on Iran, Tehran is firing retaliatory missiles bearing the words in memory of the victims of Epstein Island as it targets, right? So essentially, the Lord is putting the spirit upon these other nations to continue to call out the judgment, and the judgment really for America is complete nuclear fire, right? So, and that's what that's what happens when you're reading the law in regards to like when a woman plays the whore, when a priest's daughter essentially plays the whore, the judgment for a whore is fire, right? So it's very poetic that the Lord, when you read about Babylon, especially in chapters such as Isaiah, the 13th chapter, the Jeremiah, the 50th chapter, when it comes to it, that description, it should be as Sodom and Gomorrah. It's all goes back to fire, right? Nuclear fire via these ICBM missiles, right? So um, here, I want to just, okay, let me read the article a little bit here. It says the message references the long running scandal surrounding convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, whose network and associates have come under scrutiny following the release of files by the U.S. Department of Justice. And it's funny. It says U.S. Department of Justice, but there's really no justice. That's the irony of the whole situation. You don't actually get a sentiment of justice that is being brought forth by this nation here, America. Just bear with me 1 second. As it says in Habakkuk, the judgment never. Let me see if I can find that real quick as well. Actually, let me just pause right here. Just bear with me. Laptop's a bit slow. Okay, this is Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 4, and it says, "Therefore the law is slacked, and judgment doth never go forth, for the wicked doth compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth." So there's never essentially a proper judgment that is never going forth out of Babylon. So it essentially, it protects, it condemns the people who are upright, and then it protects the people who are abominations. And the scriptures say that he that justifieth the wicked and condemneth the just, they're both an abomination, right? But this was actually more referring to, I believe it was the ancient Chaldeans, if I'm not mistaken. But these people, that rule, they're in that same spirit of being like those ancient Chaldeans, because they were the ones that were consulting the different astrology, they were consulting, the different gods. They were like the wise men when you go back into the history of ancient Babylon. So, for example, when Nebuchadnezzar the had that dream, they were essentially the so I don't want to say wise, but they were like the wise people of that time of ancient Babylon, the ones that were consulted in regards to certain affairs or certain I don't want to say omens, but certain phenomena that happens, right? So they were the ones to kind of like so-called interpret the stars in the sky and so on and so forth, right? And it was only until our forefather Daniel that was actually able to actually bring some kind of understanding, a major amount of understanding to what was actually what the Nebuchadnezzar actually dreamt about. All right, so just to properly clarify, okay, I want to go back to the article and I want to read Nahum. Right, so just bear with me, my laptop's a bit slow. Okay, so continuing on, I'm just going to read a little bit more of it. It says Israel's former Prime Minister Ud Ehud Barak. It says, and several other public figures have also faced scrutiny over past connections to Epstein. It says allegations and Epstein ties to Israel, including um, claims that there have been links to the Ish state's intelligence agency, Mossad, have faced as well. So a lot of their, up leaders, their higher ups are very involved in this character Epstein, right? And it says in the U.S. the renewed attention has led to political pressure and resignations from some officials connected to the financier. And it says here from former U.S. President Clinton recently told lawmakers during the closed door testimony that he saw nothing and gave me pause during the times he spent with Epstein. His wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, testified before the same panel earlier. So essentially, there's a calling out of this filthy behavior that these people are involved in, and these are the people that rule over you, right? That's why a lot of our, not just our, mostly like I would say Americans, there is essentially a they're having buyer's remorse basically because they actually put, their trust um within these people that they elect, right? And then what happens? You realize, it's like buyer's remorse basically. Like when you go into the store and you buy something, and after you buy it, you're actually like, you know what, this is not what I really want, right? And the scriptures say that confidence in a man in a man of time of trouble, to roughly paraphrase, is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. An unfaithful man, to roughly paraphrase, right? I'm just kind of quoting things because my laptop's um, a bit slow. But let me just read Nahum, right? This is Nahum 3, and I'll read down to 5. That 5 is really the point. And it says, woe unto the bloody city, it is full of lies and robbery, and the prey departeth not, right? So this is actually referring to ancient Nineveh, right? But when you go into these different kingdoms, and when you read about Babylon, especially Babylon, the book of Revelation, it describes Babylon as the mother of all harlots because, she kind of, not even kind of, but she encapsulates all those filthy, abominable, odious works that have been, that were practiced in all these other ancient cities and kingdoms and so on and so forth. Everything you want to do is it's all here, right? So America is also in that spirit, so it has that spirit of ancient Egypt, Rome, Nineveh, right? So when you read about these different kingdoms and the things that they were doing, America is also in the spirit of these different kingdoms and nations. I'll just use it as an example. When you see, like, for example, how America has that two-party system, originally they were named as the patricians and the plebeians. That party system came back from Rome. So that's why when you hear prophets and teachers, they say certain things. For example, America is ancient Nineveh, is ancient Egypt, or is ancient Rome. This is why that is, right. Scripture says spiritual man judgeth all things, right. So it just has tenets, it borrows things from the ancient past, right. So even these odious works that you read about, a lot of that came from in the ancient Canaanites, right. Those people that were dwelling in the land before we actually took it and set it up and set up shop, and we were given our inheritance during the time of Joshua, right. Nevertheless, just wanted to make that quick point. um it says the noise of a whip, and the noise of rattling of the wheels, and prancing horses, and the jumping chariots. And it says the horsemen lift up both the bright sword and the glittering spear, that there is a multitude of slain and a number of carcasses, and there is none end of their corpses. They stumble upon the corpses, right? So there is essentially that glittering spear and bright sword, represents those ICBM those different missiles, right? And you can connect that with Jeremiah, the 50th chapter, where it describes the different arrows, right? Because essentially, this is all part of the Lord's vengeance, right? So here it says, verse 4, and it says, because of the multitude of whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts, the selling that selleth nations through her whoredoms, and families through her witchcrafts, right? So America is also described when you read Revelation 17 as that whore that sitteth upon, many waters, right? So that whore, that's why she sits, essentially as a queen, right? And this is the vibration that she gives off, right? It's a nation where you see a lot of her you're seeing a lot of her iniquities, right? And you're seeing the kind of behaviors that these people, that rule her, within that nation are involved in, and there's a calling out of those different behaviors, right, by these other nations. First and foremost, starting with our apostles and elders on down, right? So it says here, verse 5, and I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts. I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will show the nations thy nakedness and the kingdoms thy shame. So there's essentially, when you lift up a skirt, you're seeing all the hairs, you're seeing all the filthiness, you're seeing all the atrocities, basically, in parabolic terms, right? That this America is actually involved in. Their people are involved in. Their leaders are involved in, because their leaders are supposed to be, upright individuals. They're supposed to be moral character, humble type of individuals. And Trump and all these guys, they're far from what actually makes, good leaders, right? And the scriptures talk about how, as the leader, so as is the king, I should say, Salakia, so are the officers. So if you have the king behaving, or in this turn, or in this context, a president behaving like that, what kind of behaviors do you think your lower down officers are going to be like? You're going to appoint people that are actually in the same mind frame and same agenda, and in same and that have that same, mindset as you, right? So it's the same thing in righteousness. Just like when King Solomon, he started to work on, building the temple. He appointed certain people to be in charge of certain things. It's the same thing. They have it on their left hand side. They appoint only certain people that are within and get down with that kind of lifestyle, right? So that's pretty much it. I know I just wanted to, discuss this real quick. I thought it was a very, very interesting, you know, um, topic just to discuss here. But Lord's will, this was just quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.